Hello children, welcome to today's class. In the last class, we had learnt two poems from your prose text, The Dust of Snow and Fire and Ice. And we had also learnt some figures of speech. I hope you might have revised them at home and enjoyed reading the poem and comprehending them and also understanding the message that the poems tried to convey. Before I tell you what we are going to learn today, of course we are going to learn a chapter from your prose text. Let's go back to history. Okay? In your history, you might have studied about the freedom struggle of India, and this year in your syllabus, in the history subject, you also have the freedom struggle of Vietnam and also many other European countries. Children, why I'm talking to you about the past is that is very much related to today's chapter. In the past, the powerful countries like America, Britain, Russia, Japan, Germany, all these countries which were powerful and developed captured many countries and kept them under their control, which was known as colonial rule. And the countries which were under the powerful countries were known as colonies. And these powerful countries captured all these countries which were not developed, but they were very rich in natural resources. So they wanted to keep all the natural resources of these countries under their control so that they could prosper in the field of trade, and also as they would have more and more colonies in their control, those colonies would help them to become more powerful. Like there were two wars in the past. All of you might remember the First World War and the Second World War. During these two world wars, the powerful countries utilized the services of all the colonies which were under them. And dear children, please listen carefully as I talk of colonial rule. You all know that India had a long struggle for freedom. And you all know that Mahatma Gandhi, known as the father of the nation, had played a great role in the freedom struggle. And you know that you might have seen many movies, you might have read in your lower classes in your history subject, and also you might have read books of the great freedom struggle of India. And you are definitely aware the sufferings of the patriots in attaining freedom for us. And because of their sufferings and because of their sacrifice, we are living in a free India now with lot of rights and freedom. So if we read the sufferings of the great patriot, then we also understand the tortures which were given to them by the colonial countries or the countries which practiced imperialism or the imperial rule. So many countries in the past did not have their own freedom. They were under some of the powerful countries. And as awareness spread and as great leaders encouraged people to fight for their freedom, made them realize that they have to rise up and struggle for their freedom. No one is born to be a slave or deprived of their rights. So in the same way, Vietnam also had struggle for freedom. You will be reading about the struggle of Vietnam also, though it was a small country, how it became strong and struggled and became independent. In the same way, many African countries were also the colonies of the powerful European powers. Dear children, as I told you, the countries which were colonies were not poor. They were very rich in their resources. So the African countries were also very rich in their resources. People had their own land, they had their own cattle, and they were very happy, they were prosperous, and they enjoyed their life. But all of a sudden, these European powers came and occupied or have control over these African countries. And what happened? Slowly, they took away everything they had. They took away their land, they took away their cattle, and slowly their freedom, and made them their slaves. You might have read about slavery. They were treated as slaves, they were tortured. Right, children? And finally, when the sufferings became too much and the people of Africa were discriminated on the basis of the color of their skin, the whites of the country discriminated the blacks of their own country and made them slaves. They were beaten very badly and they were tortured and they had to suffer a lot. They lost their jobs, they lost everything, and they were, sometimes even chained up like slaves. And they were made to do a lot of hard work. And the natural resources and other facilities of the countries were being utilized by the whites. This is called as racial discrimination. Just like in India, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, the country gained freedom. In Africa also, there emerged a great leader, a great personality, Nelson Mandela, who fought for the freedom of the blacks. And he was such a great personality that he was able to win freedom of the African country, South Africa, and he became the first black president of South Africa. South Africa is a country in the African continent and which is in the south of the African continent. So dear children, if you want to know about the struggle of the blacks for their freedom, the saga of the blacks against the apartheid. Again, apartheid means it is a system where the discrimination takes place on the basis of the color of their skin. Right? So your second chapter of the prose, the first flight, is Nelson Mandela, the long walk to freedom. It is the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. Autobiography means the story of a person written by himself. Biography is the story of a person written by somebody else, but autobiography is the story of a person written by himself. So, Long Walk to Freedom is the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, and in this chapter we will study and try to understand how Nelson Mandela, who was later known as the father of the nation in Africa, just like Mahatma Gandhi is known as the father of the nation in India, Nelson Mandela is known as the father of the nation in Africa. So this chapter talks about the long struggle for their freedom and their ultimate victory, and how Nelson Mandela became the first black president in South Africa. So the story is in different parts. Today we'll try to understand the first part and then continue the second part. Children, I have been talking to you about your efforts in improving your reading skills. When you learn any chapter of your prose text, it is very important for you to read again and again and make notes. Right? Self-learning is very important. The more you read, the more you try to comprehend, the more you make notes, it helps you. Till now we have learnt how to comprehend a passage by looking at the difficult words in the dictionary, by writing about the characters, their qualities, and also noting down the important lines or the key points from each paragraph, so that it helps you to understand the paragraph and finally understand the lesson better. Today, let's try to understand how to make notes on the basis of the key points of the paragraph of your lesson. That means when you read a particular lesson, you have to understand the key points of each paragraph. So sometimes maybe if you find a particular paragraph small, you can take two paragraphs together. And while you're reading, note down the key points. So if you remember the key points, then it helps you to remember the events, the different events mentioned in the lesson. And ultimately, it will also help you to remember the lesson. So if you understand and remember the lesson, then you will be able to answer the questions in your own words in a better manner. So if you make key points of each paragraph, after reading each paragraph, it will be easy for you to revise before your examination also. Before your examination, you do not again go through the entire lesson. You can just look at the notes you have made, you can look at the key points, and then the entire event will come back to your mind. The things which you have read will come back to your mind, and it is easy for you to remember the key points. So today I will tell you how we can make the key points and try to understand the entire episode. So today we will try to understand, or as I told you before also, you have to divide the lesson into different parts, into different topics. Like the chapter 2 of your prose text, A Long Walk to Freedom. Initially, it talks about the Inauguration Ceremony. Inauguration Ceremony means the swearing in of Nelson Mandela as the first black president of South Africa. So it talks about the ceremony, where it took place, how it took place, what were the arrangements, and how memorable it was for the people of Africa. So the ceremony is one part. And then it also talks about the address of Nelson Mandela. After the swearing in ceremony, how did he address the nation? What were the key points of his address? How did he make the people of South Africa realize how important is it for them to preserve the hard-earned freedom? What are the values he gives them in his address? And then he also goes back to the past. He talks of the time when he was not even born, from the time when the system of apartheid started in South Africa, and then slowly how he grew up, and then what were the sufferings he underwent, and at last what is the message he gives. So there are different parts. Today we'll try to take up the inauguration ceremony, the swearing in ceremony of Nelson Mandela, and also his address. So I have made the key points of 5 pages, and also we will try to look at the address of Nelson Mandela, which is very important for you to understand. Okay? You might have also watched our Prime Minister's address after the swearing in ceremony. So in the same way, we will also look at the address of Nelson Mandela, how he addressed the people, and try to understand it. So let's go back to the key points, and that I have taken from the initial 5 pages of your text. So after I finish the lesson, you can read the lesson again and try to go back to the key points and write them in your notebook. So let's go back to the key points. Nelson Mandela, long walk to freedom. You can see the picture of Nelson Mandela on the screen. Now, as I told you, these are the key points of the inauguration ceremony. Inauguration ceremony means the day when Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the first black president of South Africa. So it was a memorable day for the people of South Africa. So now the key points from your text. The ceremony took place on 10th of May 1994 in the Union Building Amphitheatre in Pretoria. Amphitheatre means, children, a big area without a building, without a roof, and it has got seats in a slanting manner. Even in Port Blair, we have one amphitheatre you might have seen during the Island Tourism Festival. It is in Anarkali village. If you haven't seen, you can go and have a look at the amphitheatre. Then politicians and dignitaries from more than 140 countries attended. See how historic this occasion is. And please look at the points, bullet points very carefully. And it was the largest gathering in South Africa, and rainbow gathering of different colors and nations. I told you that the Africans, the black Africans, were discriminated by the whites on the basis of the color of their skin, apartheid, the system of apartheid. So this particular gathering, the swearing in ceremony, was attended by people from different races, different colors, the blacks and whites, everybody had gathered. And Nelson Mandela was accompanied by daughter Zinani on this historic occasion. Mr. D. Lerk was sworn in as the second deputy president, and Mr. Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as the first deputy president, and Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the first black president of South Africa. So here in this point, the three people who were sworn in: the second deputy president, the first deputy president, and Nelson Mandela. And what other things happened on that particular day? An impressive display of South African jets, helicopters, troop carriers, and it was a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, which was freely and fairly elected. A chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue and gold of the South African flag. Two national anthems were played by the blacks and the whites, the old one and the new one, both. And though both of them did not know the lyrics properly, but they were singing. It was a joyous occasion celebrated by the blacks and the whites together, and both the national anthems were sung. So the inauguration ceremony, though it is in more detail in your text, so I have tried to put the inauguration ceremony in 9 or 10 bullet points. So it will be easy for you to remember these points, and then according to the marks allotted for your question in the question paper, you can write down the answers. So it will be easy for you to remember these bullet points, and when you remember these bullet points, you can write about the entire inauguration ceremony and explain them in detail. So let's go to the next topic. So this was the first topic, the inauguration ceremony. Where it happened, how many people attended, okay, what were the other things which were part of the inauguration ceremony, the beautiful display of the South African jets, okay, and about the national anthem. So these were the important points of the inauguration ceremony. Now let's look at the next topic or heading of the concept of this chapter. After the inaugural ceremony or the inauguration, Nelson Mandela addresses the nation. We'll look at his address also after this. But in between he also talks about the history of South Africa and the courage of its people. So I have tried to put it in bullet points and let's look at it. So when he talks about the past, the history of South Africa, that means he tells that even before he was born, the racial discrimination started in South Africa. Racial discrimination by the whites of South Africa against the blacks of their own land. The freedom had come through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of South Africans and their courage and their sufferings. He also remembers that because of the sacrifices of thousands of Africans, they could gain this freedom. And then he also says that it would take years to recover from the sufferings caused due to the policy of apartheid. Apartheid, I had told you, the policy of racial discrimination. So he says the sufferings or the loss that occurred because of this system, it would take a long time to come out of it, to recover. And he also says that Africa is rich in minerals and gems, but he says its greatest wealth are its people, who are finer and truer than the purest diamonds. And then he appreciates those great patriots of South Africa who had sacrificed their lives for the freedom of the country, or to free the people from this discrimination and to give them their rights and freedoms. And he also tells that he had learnt courage from comrades in the struggle. From all those people of South Africa, those great patriots who had suffered during the freedom struggle and who had shown extraordinary courage, and they were brave and they had the ability to tolerate everything and to overcome whatever happened to them, the great sufferings. So they had such great qualities. He also talks of courage here. He says that he learnt courage from those people. And he goes on talking about courage. He says that courage is not absence of fear. It is triumph over it. Triumph means victory. Courage is not the loss of fear or the absence of fear. We have to overcome that fear. Therefore, he also says that a brave man is not the one who does not have fear, but a brave man is the one who conquers fear, who overcomes the fear. So he has seen this in the patriots who had fought for the freedom in South Africa, that they had such qualities. If you read the text, you will understand, as I told you, they had great ability to tolerate things, to tolerate the sufferings, and to bear the pain given to them. They were brave, they were courageous, and they did not have fear. They had learned to overcome the fear, and they had strength. They displayed their great strength and showed that they can do anything for their nation to gain freedom for their people. So, from page number 17 to page number 21, the inauguration ceremony, and then Nelson Mandela talks about the history of South Africa and also the sacrifices of the people of South Africa during the freedom struggle. Now let's look at the historic address of Nelson Mandela. Today all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. We who were outlaws not so long ago have today been given the rare privilege to be host to the nations of the world on our own soil. We thank all of our distinguished international guests for having come to take position with the people of our country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. So he addresses by saying that on this occasion where we have a newborn liberty, we have given us our own liberty. And he says, an extraordinary human disaster. Now, what is the disaster he is talking about? The long rule of racial discrimination, the long sufferings of the people of South Africa. So, and also he talks about the colonial rule in different parts of the world. People in different parts have been suffering, different countries have been suffering under the colonial rule. So he talks about the long struggle. The disaster he talks about is the apartheid he is talking about, the racial discrimination, which lasted for a long time. And he says, now we are proud of this liberty, right? And he also says that we who were outlaws, outlaws means in South Africa, apartheid was being practiced, and because of this policy, many countries did not have a proper relation with South Africa. So they were cut off. So they were like outlaws. He says, but now we have the rare privilege. Once upon a time when they were suffering and they were like outlaws, like slaves, and they did not have any relation with other countries, today he says it is a rare opportunity for them to host this particular event where people from so many countries, 140 countries were there, of different races, of different colors. So this was a rare opportunity which was being held on the South African soil. And then he also thanked all the distinguished guests for being there to honor him on that historic occasion. And also he says it's a victory of justice, for peace, for human dignity. This victory for them has given equality to the people, justice to the people, and also peace to the world. Not only to their own nation, but also to the world. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender and other discrimination. Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. Now here he talks of political emancipation. That means freedom from restriction. Now they did not have any restriction. And then he also takes a pledge while addressing the nation. Now what is the pledge he takes? To liberate all people from the bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender and other discrimination. That means all these years the people of South Africa had suffered. Now he says this freedom will bring an end to their sufferings. And now he's going to ensure that there will be no poverty, nobody will be deprived of their rights, everybody will be treated equally, and there will be no more sufferings and no discrimination on the basis of gender or any other discrimination. And then he makes one very important statement saying that never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land, I told you Africa was not a country to be suffered like this for such a long time. it was very rich in natural resources, which was exploited by the colonial rulers. So he says this beautiful land is not going to experience this oppression, this cruel rule, this cruelty anymore in future. Now nobody is going to rule over us anymore. In future, we are not going to allow any power to rule over us. And the sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Now what is the achievement he is talking about? He is talking about the freedom. Such a long years of suffering has come to an end, and the freedom that South Africa has achieved. So he says this is a glorious achievement, the freedom of the nation. And Nelson Mandela becoming the first black president. So he says that this is a glorious human achievement. And he says, let this freedom rule. Let this freedom continue. And he asks God to bless Africa. So this speech of Nelson Mandela is really historic, where he talks of preserving the freedom of the nation, which they have gained after the sacrifices of thousands of its people. I hope his address is clear to you now. Dear children, you can even make bullet points out of this address of Nelson Mandela. What were the main points he spoke about? He spoke of liberty, he spoke of freedom from restriction, he spoke of a glorious achievement, and he spoke of the rare opportunity which the soil of Africa had by hosting this particular event. So in the same manner, you can note down the bullet points as I showed you for two other concepts from this lesson, the inauguration ceremony and the history of South Africa. So you can put his speech also in bullet points, so that whenever you look at the points, the entire speech of Nelson Mandela comes to your mind and you remember it. Once you try to put the concepts in points, then it becomes easy for you to remember the different concepts of the topic. So dear children, I hope you understood the part we discussed today of chapter 2, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. We'll continue the chapter in the next class, but until then I would request you to read the portion which we have covered today and also make bullet points out of the concepts which you read at home. Also, you might have noted down the bullet points which I discussed with you today, and you can make your own bullet points of the portions which we have covered. And also, if you could read the remaining part, so that it will be easy for you to understand when we discuss it in our next class. So until then, take care of yourself, stay safe, stay at home. Thank you.